What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and on this channel, we break down the trials and cases you care most about so you can understand how the American civil and criminal justice system works. And we try to make sure you understand what your rights are in every situation, which is why we try to walk you through the entire legal process while also answering your insightful questions along the way. And while it's not legal advice, it's always exciting. So buckle up for another episode of The Lawyer You Know. What's up, everybody? We are back here for another case that you have asked about over and over again over the last 4 weeks. And we haven't done a video on it on the channel yet because as I responded to a lot of your messages, until there's some kind of value I can add or angle I can explain to try to help you understand the process better, this is not a whodunit show. I'm not a detective. I'm not trying to figure out who the perpetrator is in this case, but things are happening that I think actually remind me of some other cases that have happened this year, and you all can watch and learn how law is developed. And as these cases get national attention, there's a reaction to them. And can we do things better? Can we create laws that better protect the citizens of each state in the United States or as a whole federally? And I think that's something that could be coming with a string of cases. And today we're talking about the Idaho University tragedy that happened almost exactly a month ago. And a lot of you have been sending me videos on this, similar to the Delphi case. And again, I said, while there's an ongoing investigation, they're trying to figure out who did it. I'm not really sure what I can add to that discussion, but for explaining to you how an investigation works, which I think most of you understand. But in this case, there have been allegations from the victims' families that the investigation is lacking. It's negligent. They're not doing their job. They have been very frustrated with the details that have been leaked to the press that have been either incorrect or inconsistent with some other details, and the lack of details that they're giving even the victims' families. So one of those victims' families, and I'm going to mispronounce her name. I've heard it almost sounds like Gonzalez, but I think it's Goncalves is how you say it. Kaylee Goncalves's parents or father has hired an attorney now as part of this investigation, a criminal defense attorney for the victim in a criminal case. We'll explain why, what that means, what a lawyer can do, and how this may affect future lawsuits if we do find that this investigation was in fact negligent. We're going to talk about what cases that may be similar to. Do we have a precedent for this? What would it look like if they wanted to file those lawsuits? And are any of the victims' families' actions going to come back as something that law enforcement may use in their defense? So I want to start out by saying I feel horrible for the victims' families. There's nothing worse than, I have kids of my own, thinking about sending them to college, especially in University of Idaho, where it's supposed to be safe, small town. Tragedies like this just don't happen, and now they're dealing with this. So we can't even understand what they're going through, let alone condemn any of their actions, because at this point, all they care about is finding who did this. Everything else be damned. Because get out of the way, we need to find who did this. I don't care if people don't like me. I don't care if people don't like what I'm doing. I don't care if people say I'm helping this person or hurting that person. I want to find who did this. That's how the victims' families are acting at this point, and we really can't condemn them for that. But legally speaking, we can talk about how those actions and future actions may come into play if we find out this was a negligent investigation or we have future lawsuits. So if you're interested in this case, I'm going to give a little bit of background about what happened and what we know, what's happening in the investigation, and then answer those questions about an attorney coming into the process at this point. So if you're interested in this case and those details and the legal angles of it, not necessarily playing detective and trying to figure out and, tell you on this channel who did it, but if you're interested in that, hit the like button, subscribe to our page, and hit that reminder bell, and let me know in the comments, because if you all are interested in this, as it seems like you are from my Instagram and Twitter messages, if you want to find me on there, @TragosLaw is our handle, then I'll continue doing update videos on this as things happen and as hopefully they do find who did this. So brief background. 6 students live in a house together. I'm sure a lot of you know a lot more about this than I do. A lot of this is, secondhand coming from news reporting, but 6 students live in a house together, University of Idaho. They seem to be normal students. No major issues or anything coming to make it so there was a drug deal or something like that where you would say, oh, okay, it's more understandable that this happened this way. Totally normal students. They went out on a Saturday night as college students do. They get back to the house around 2 a.m. And the next morning, 4 of them are found fatally attacked. And 2 of them untouched. And that's the weird, crazy part of this. The 2 on the first floor were totally fine when they woke up the next morning, but the students on the second and third story of this house were not. And the investigation began trying to figure out who did it. The details have been sparse. They really don't know a lot. Law enforcement ends up leaking that they believe it was a targeted attack, although they don't know which victim was the target. Based on where they were and what happened and the wounds, they think it may have been one or the other. They have no details really about the murder weapon. They've talked about a jagged object. They've talked about a military knife. All sorts of different things have come out, but it doesn't seem like they actually know what the weapon was. There were some suspicious characters caught on body cam footage where an officer stopped them for drinking and said, are you underage? And there was a conversation, but that led to nothing. There was a potential stalker of one of the victims that the law enforcement looked into, and that was a dead end. There was a next door neighbor who's a law student who became a suspect based on TikTok detectives, from what I hear. He voluntarily gave his DNA. Interesting for a law student to do that. And just as a little side note, all the reporters are like, oh, to prove he was innocent, he gave his DNA, as if him not giving his DNA or submitting to that or not talking to law enforcement means he's not innocent or that he does have something to hide, which is in fact incorrect and stepping all over people's constitutional rights. So as these investigations happen, we want things to be done right. We want them to find the right person, but we don't think everybody has to light their constitutional rights on fire, especially when, detectives on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube or whatever are pointing the finger and not even the actual investigators in the case. So that was sad that happened. He got caught in the crosshairs. If he's the killer, I hope they do find him and, figure it out. But that was just a little side note. And then there's this white, so they looked into him and it turns out that was also a dead end. And then there's this white Hyundai. And now they're looking into that. There's mixed reports. Does this have something to do with it? Does it not? They're finally getting into some security camera videos. But it has been a full month. And it seems like there are no suspects. And the father of Kaylee Goncalves has had enough. And he has gone on news stations. He has taken it to the press. This is very familiar to a case right here in our backyard in Florida that happened earlier this year. He's asking for people to let him know what happens or let him know what they know and explain how law enforcement has messed up this case, how they're not using logic. They're not connecting dots. They're not making simple discoveries. The coroner has told him how his daughter's wounds were different than other victims. And that should indicate that she was the target. And these weren't just stab wounds. The type of wounds and the type of injuries that she has indicates things. And the strength, because 2 of these victims were male. So the strength to be able to even commit these crimes, it had to be a male perpetrator, but they won't even say that. How do you have no leads in a small town like this on a case like this? Based on where he went in the house, do you feel like he was a friend, so he knew where he was going? Or did he break in? One of the victims said they may have changed the locks on the door, but they don't know if it's the door to the house or the door to their individual room. As many college houses or apartments do, you share it, and your individual room also has a lock, so you can lock yourself in there. Sometimes you have random roommates. Sometimes you know your roommates, regardless, but they don't know which lock potentially was changed. Law enforcement has let out some information that seems like, oh, we've got it going. We know what happened. There was a target. Then maybe it wasn't a targeted attack. And Kaylee's dad said he thinks they may have just said that to make people feel safe, when in fact they shouldn't feel safe. Because if going out to a bar on a Saturday night in college and coming back to your house and going to sleep makes you a target, then everybody's a target. And there is some logic to that. So he is frustrated and he's taken it to the press literally. But even that has not accomplished his goal of getting the answers. So what did he do? He hired a criminal defense lawyer who is also a former prosecutor. Former prosecutors understand how this process works because they've been involved in it before. They know people at the state attorney's office or the DA's office. They know law enforcement officers. Criminal defense lawyers do a lot as well because we work with them. But when we actually are prosecutors and we go through the invest phase of a case, we understand what it's like to interview witnesses, to be there with law enforcement officers sometimes, to understand this person's a witness or this person's a suspect. Can we charge this person? Do we have enough evidence against them? So they hire somebody in that case to do what? What can a lawyer accomplish? He's not a detective. He's not a law enforcement officer. What can he do? Well, he's working in tandem with an investigator that they said, the family said, has 50 years of experience, when the law enforcement officers are totally inexperienced and don't even know what they're doing. So they think they have somebody better privately to investigate the case. And we know what he's going to do: talk to witnesses, track down every lead. But what is a lawyer going to do? A lawyer is going to ask the right questions. They're going to understand the process and who the right person is to talk to. Because sometimes if you call as part of an investigation, somebody answers the phone or talks to you first that doesn't know anything. You got to get to the right person. A lawyer can document a file, so everybody will forever know when this family asked questions, what questions it is that they asked, and what answers they received from law enforcement, if any. A lawyer will also make sure the pressure is put on so they know if anything goes wrong in this investigation, there may be lawsuits. People may lose their job. There may be reprimands. There may be sanctions. And I can understand the argument on both sides and the negative aspect. Do we want people to be nervous? Do we want law enforcement to be looking over their shoulder during this investigation? And usually I could understand that. But we're a month in, and this family is afraid of this case going cold or turning into Delphi, taking 6 years. And we all know how much harder it is to prosecute a case 6 years from now versus now, especially with all the technology and cell phones and pinging and security cameras. But it is Idaho, so that may be a little different. Having a lawyer on the case can also prevent some of those leaks that have already been happening from law enforcement that they've backtracked on or given inconsistent information on. Yet at the same time, they're asking law enforcement for more details. And maybe what a lawyer can do is law enforcement can trust the lawyer to tell them certain details, to explain to the client and tell the client, you cannot go to the press and say certain things. You can't do certain things. A lawyer can actually do damage control on both sides of this equation. The client hires them to deal with law enforcement, but they can also deal with the client at the same time and help the client understand why what they are doing, they understand the motivation behind it is pure and absolutely going towards the right goal, but how they could actually be hurting the process versus helping it. A lawyer will explain that to them, because on their own, they're just thinking, bull in a china shop. Let's run through this, put as much pressure on as we can. So this reminds me of the case I referenced already, the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie case. Gabby Petito's parents tried to put pressure on everyone they could. People wouldn't talk to them. The investigation was not great. They were getting all sorts of tips from around the world, some helpful, some not. And I don't want to always condemn those tips, because I know they have actually caught fugitives on the run in Canada and other cases, and they have been beneficial. So there's a positive and negative to every aspect of this. But this is where the world seems to be going. And I think we need to understand this process, and states need to be funded to be able to deal with all of these tips. And maybe we don't, promote so much the whodunit stuff so that everybody comes up with a new theory where there's a new victim of the process because they've been accused of a heinous crime when they really may have had nothing to do with it. But in the Petito situation, lawsuits have been filed based on potential witnesses in the case not coming forward with information, the Laundrie parents, and the Moab Police Department for not properly investigating that domestic violence and not doing what they should have done to prevent it in the first place. And if any lawsuits come towards the law enforcement officers in this Idaho case, it's not going to be the damages or the fatalities, because they didn't cause those. They couldn't have prevented those. But it could have emotional damages, depending on the laws in Idaho, about not finding the person who did this because they were negligent. Just not finding the person who did this, you can't sue law enforcement for that because they can't have a perfect success rate. But if they did certain things that made this investigation negligent and prevented them from finding who did it, we could see potential lawsuits. And that's why you have a lawyer on the case right now to document the file from the beginning and document the damages potentially from the beginning. But the actions of this lawyer and the actions of the victims and their parents will come into play. Because if the worst case scenario happens here and they don't find who did it, and a lawsuit is filed against the law enforcement officers or their department for a negligent investigation, you better believe they will point the finger back at the victims' families, as horrible as that sounds. Saying that because they leaked this information to the press, because they made this so public, the potential perpetrator could have seen that, could have helped him hide, could have helped him get away, could have aided him in avoiding this investigation and avoiding getting caught. And that'll be a legitimate argument that they make. Now, because of all the pressure and the nationwide interest in the case, it's probably not going to be a successful defense, but it is something they will argue. And again, I don't blame them one bit. And I, as always, am with the victims in this case. And we know with 100% certainty that these are victims in this case. We don't know who did it yet, but we know they are victims suffering horrible losses, innocent lives taken for nothing that they have done wrong. So I cannot blame them for doing every single thing they possibly can within their power and legally speaking to try and find who did it. So I don't blame her father at all. I would do the same exact thing if I thought it could help find who did this. But if this is a negligent investigation, then those are the kind of details. Anything said in public, anything said in interviews, anything said online can and will be used in that case. And so that's how you can watch this angle of the case and understand that now a lawyer is involved. If you start seeing things happen more quickly, it's probably because the pressure he's putting on it. If the case lasts longer and doesn't go cold as early in the process as some other cases may have, he could be a reason why. He will probably make public statements on the family's behalf. He will probably talk to law enforcement instead of directly talking to the family. And that can happen. That can help a lot of things move more quickly. He can make sure law enforcement is investigating every legitimate lead, because if they're not, they know there are going to be legal repercussions. And to me, keeping everybody on their toes, keeping everybody focused on the goal and doing the right thing by these victims is worth it and is what we would all want if it was us, if it was our family member, our daughter, our sister, our brother, our son. So it's going to be something that we watch, and we'll see how a lawyer affects the process, because right now a month has gone by, and this is the month where most of the information is going to be gathered, and we don't have a lot, and it doesn't seem like we're close. So hopefully it helps. If you enjoyed this content, hit that like button and let me know what questions you have about this case, about this part of the process from a lawyer who's prosecuted cases, who's done invests, who's done criminal defense, who's done civil sides, who's sued law enforcement for negligence in the civil justice system. Let me know. What questions do you have that I can answer to help you understand this process a little bit more? Let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. And if this is the first video you've seen in this channel or on this channel, let me know in the comments as well, because I love to see the new subscribers that come from new cases that we break down. And if you guys aren't interested in this case at all, just let me know and we can move on to another case that you're more interested in hearing my take on. So I just finished recording the first video and I see a news clip come in through News Nation, some more tidbits of what's coming out, more information about this case. And we get our first little view into how the victim's family lawyer is going to play a part in this case, what he's going to say. He makes a statement on behalf of the family. I expect to see more of this. It's pretty much what we expected, but let's watch this clip together here and see if there's anything to react to in it. Again, how good the information is in it, we don't know, but let's see how the lawyer handles this and how he's going to be involved when new things happen in this case.
A white Hyundai Elantra speeding by a gas station on the night 4 University of Idaho students were murdered. Police in Moscow looking to speak with the driver of that car.
As more time passes without an arrest, we are learning new details about the morning police received a call about the murders. Senior national correspondent Brian Enton is in Moscow, Idaho.
Police are now talking more about what the scene was like when they first arrived after the murders. For the first time, we're also talking to the attorney representing Kaylee Gonzalez's family, and he's talking more about the victim's family relationship with the police. It is eerily quiet at the University of Idaho. With graduation over and most finals moved online, there are almost no students on campus. 1 month after the brutal murder of 4 students, and their families are anxious.
So they already mentioned the family attorney. They say for the first time we're talking to him. So he's becoming a part of this story. He's becoming a character in this story, which is what the lawyers do because we are mouthpieces for clients and victims in these situations.
For any information. Victim Kaylee Gonzalez's parents met with the investigators just yesterday, according to their attorney. Have you or the family
met with investigators yesterday, according to their attorney? So again, we're in a situation where attorneys are speaking for their clients. Think back to Petito and Laundrie. Think back to Waldman and Depp. So this stuff happens a lot, but what lawyers say is really important.
received any new updates on the investigation?
Well, part of our delay was we met with the investigators yesterday. The theme of the meeting was two things: was accountability and communication.
Attorney Shannon Gray says
So
the family wants a more consistent.
What they really want is more communication, and they want accountability can mean a lot of things. Are law enforcement, are they going to be held accountable? Are they talking about holding the person who did this accountable? What does he mean by accountability, right? But I think he uses those words specifically and on purpose, purposefully. He chose those words purposefully to get across the point that he wants. And they absolutely want more communication. They want more details about what's going on. Now, law enforcement probably in return wants less leaks to the press.
Stream of information from police. He says most of their questions about the investigation have still gone unanswered, but they are hopeful police are doing the right things.
Again, those are quotes coming from the lawyer. They want more of a constant stream of information coming from law enforcement, and they have so many unanswered questions.
New Tuesday, Moscow police released a video with new information about what happened soon after they got the initial call.
I got called at home. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and it took me a second. I really had to think about what I had just heard.
Moscow Police Captain Roger Lanier says it was a somber scene when police arrived.
It was incredibly hard for the community, but it was also really, really hard on our officers, some of whom were very young, and that was the first real major crime scene.
It's probably not what you want to hear if you're the family and these are the officers investigating, that it was really difficult for them because they were young. Training can only do so much. And, everybody has their first case and everybody has their first investigation, but that's why there need to be supervisors that are experienced with them to make sure that this does not affect the investigation at all.
That they had encountered. So emotionally, it was a very, very draining day.
Police maintain they have information they are not releasing, but they say they still have no suspect and continue to ask people with information on a white Hyundai Elantra seen near the house the morning of the murders to contact investigators. One question that I've been asked over and over again is why no reward? I mean, in other cases, we'll see a big reward. It makes people come out and talk. Why no
Can also bring false reports.
reward here?
We've been so successful and really can thank the community and the public for all the tips they are providing us. A reward.
They have their own spokeswoman, it seems like. So not a law enforcement officer, but a spokeswoman for the police department.
Maybe is an option down the road, but we have such good information from the public as we are right now. We're working with that first.
Police also concerned about all the rumors on social media. They say that those rumors are bogging down the investigation, leading to tips that really have nothing to do with anything. They even say there's people from social media who have reached out to individuals involved in the case, and there have even been death threats. Adrian?
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, that's wild to think that that's what's happening. But that gives you a little insight into how the family attorney is going to be inserted in the process. He's going to be quoted. We're going to see him. We're going to hear him. We're going to read quotes from what he said coming directly from the family and about the investigation. He's going to be the mouthpiece. He's going to be the mediator between. It's going to be very interesting, and we're going to get to know him throughout this case. So again, let me know what you think in the comments if you have any questions. And if you want me to keep following this case, please let me know. For now, that's all we got.